I've got an offer for retirement. Is it worth it? This is really the question of 2025 for federal employees. It's no secret there's been an incredible amount of change in the federal workplace, continuing to transition. We're not sure into what just quite yet, but there's been a lot of uncertainty. And so in this video today, I want to examine some of the dynamics that are going into how you evaluate an offer for an early retirement than maybe you had originally planned. I also want to showcase that these situations are often far from perfect. Even for the folks that are accepting a VERA offer, the deferred resignation program, there's usually challenges that they're trying to overcome, adjustments they're going to have to make along the way. They got to establish priorities and maybe in some cases even change expectations to make this thing work. So I think that's important to note because a lot of times I think we get kind of hung up on thinking things actually have to be perfect in order to make this decision. The reality is, there's going to be adjustments, sacrifices, got to make choices, right? Weigh your options, try to come up with a balanced decision, trust your instincts. I think those are some of the best things that we can do. Let's back up a little bit. So I'm going to share two examples with you to kind of illustrate some situational stuff based on some conversations I've had recently, some interesting cases, but a little background here. So, as I mentioned, it's no secret the federal workplace is changing, and the overwhelming reason federal employees are accepting an early retirement offer is the changing workplace, right? The workplace has changed significantly, since the beginning of the year as the new administration has come in and enacted different policies. So return to office, adding hours to your commute on a day-to-day basis, an untenable workplace, maybe your workload has increased, maybe the office isn't what it used to be. Things have changed there as well. And of course, the risks that are hanging over everybody's head, there's a lot of uncertainty there. Will I be subject to a reduction in force? Will I be fired? Will I lose my job? So all those things kind of weigh on you on a day-to-day basis. It gets pretty heavy at some point and you start thinking, if I had that offer, would I take it? If I do have that offer in hand, should I take it? Is it a good idea? How do I make a good decision here? That's kind of where we're at in this process. And that's what we want to talk a little bit more about in this video here today. And just to reiterate, it's rare that these decision points are easy. They usually have some degree of uncertainty. You just have to put all the variables together, run the scenarios, and trust your instincts to make the best decision for your situation. So let's talk a little bit about these conversations I had. So I've got a 51-year-old federal employee, about 24 years of service, married, 3 kids, and they received the deferred resignation offer and considering what that means for them. And really the motivation behind evaluating this thing at an earlier age is, a commute that added hours to, sitting in a car to get to the office to do work that could probably be done much more easily at home on a telework agreement that would kind of predated the pandemic even. So pretty drastic change would require big sacrifices and adjustments in their lifestyle. Really, they don't want to make these changes. Wife or spouse works and they've got a great balance sheet, right? Household income is well over $300,000. Balance sheet looks great. They've got about $800,000 in a TSP account. They've got $175,000 in cash, got about $600,000 in home equity, and the spouse has about $300,000 in a retirement account. So really healthy balance sheet, as you can see, but they're early 50s. So, there's still a lengthy time period ahead of them to make this thing work and a lot of moving parts. Okay, so some of the goals here that are complicating things: 3 kids, 1's in college already, 2 are going to be going to college. They're looking at a high price tag for these educational expenses. So private universities is where the oldest is going, and the youngest 2 are probably considering the same. And of course, there's other options for this type of expense, right? But they're committed to and feel very strongly about paying for these education expenses. And they have about 50% saved for each of the children based on their calculations of what the expenses might be. So there's work to do that's going to need to come out of income and how we're going to pay for this thing as we go for all 3 children. So that's complicating. The other complicating factor is an expensive mortgage. So housing costs a little over $6,000 a month when you consider the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, everything going into it. So right off the bat, we're talking about some big expenses that put us well over $100,000 on the annual amount of those expenses. We looked at the pension. It would be about 40 grand a year, okay, which is nice, but it's still not going to make up the difference even just alone for the housing expense, right? You're still got a shortfall from that standpoint. The spouse is going to continue to work, but there's a shortfall that we're going to need to make up, which, I don't know what the exact number is. That's kind of a work in progress of, if you got 40 grand coming in, do you need to make another $60,000, $75,000, $100,000 a year to get where we need to be? okay, just to kind of meet lifestyle and, some of those expenses that we just talked about. So you need to make more than that, right? And then we're not even talking about the impact of not saving going forward as much as maybe they had been accustomed to trying to build that nest egg. Now, the TSP does have about $800,000 in it. Let's just take a quick look at this as one of those supporting factors into making this decision. So 800 grand, say you make 8% times 10 years. So they're 51 now, they'd be 61, kind of in that 60 to 62 range, getting to more of a normal retirement age, if we want to call it that. There really isn't a normal retirement age. It's kind of what's right for you. But just looking 10 years down the road, what would happen to that $800,000? Hopefully they don't need to tap into it all. That's kind of the worst case scenario is you take the deferred resignation, you take the VER offer, and then you actually have to start tapping into retirement accounts. They're not even eligible at this point, right? Because not 55 yet. So accessing the TSP would come with some consequences. So anyway, 800 grand times 8% times 10 years, that gives me a balance of 1.727,139. So 1.7 million and change, right? So that's a great portfolio. Now, if they're able to continue to add, let's just call it $15,000 a year, they're currently maxing this thing out. So they're putting 30 grand a year, but if they do 15K a year, that puts us up to 1.961 million. Okay. So another bump up there. And then if they do the 30 grand, like they're currently doing, continuing to make the 8% over the 10-year period, you got 2.196 million. Okay. Now, okay, those just kind of sound like numbers maybe, right? So we go from 1.7 million up to 2.1, almost 2.2 million if you add 30K a year over that 10-year period. So that's a big difference. But what does that mean in terms of potential income from the portfolio, right? So, at the 1.727 number, at 4%, we'd be able to take $69,085 a year at a 4% distribution rate. Bumping that up with $15,000 a year, you'd be able to take $78,472 a year. So $9,400 a year difference in income, that's significant. And then again, if you bump it up to 30K, those are your annual contributions. So you get the portfolio value up to almost 2.2 million. At 4%, you're talking about $87,860 a year at a 4% distribution. So another $9,000 in change that we add to potential retirement income, which is super helpful, right? Those are some of the sacrifices and the trade-offs you're looking at. Now, this is without taking any distributions from the account. If you take money and you start spending this thing down, right, you're gonna have a hard time accumulating more. Maybe you stay stable, maybe you grow a little bit, but you're gonna have a hard time. That presents some pretty significant challenges if you start drawing on your retirement portfolio earlier than you might like to. Those are just some of the factors that go into thinking about how to make this decision. So for this person, exploring some exciting opportunities, will they be able to find the next chapter, whatever that might be? It's going to give them the work-life balance that they need, also allow them to contribute to the family needs for income, to fund those education goals, lifestyle goals, and then continue to fund retirement goals. Those are the big questions they have to answer. They have to weigh all those variables, not just taking the TSP into consideration, but also other retirement accounts, what they're going to do with the house. Are they going to relocate? There's some home equity there, right? So it's a bigger question than maybe what I just outlined here. Just wanted to give you a little perspective on how to think through that, okay? So complicated question, but like I said, these things are rarely perfect. So there's some trade-offs here, and we just got to work through them and trust your gut to some extent on this. So second situation, I got a 53-year-old who's got over 30 years of service. The workplace has become stressful. Okay, so things have changed dramatically there, and it's not a situation that they want to continue to be in long term. So with an offer on the table, they want to consider it seriously and probably take the offer for retirement. Now, this situation is a little more complicated because the balance sheet doesn't look quite the same. There's still some work to do from that standpoint. They're not in a bad position by any means, but there's just a little bit of work left to do. Now, the pension based on their years of service, their high three, would be about $2,200 a month. Okay, so that's helpful to start contributing to their goals. In particular, are leaving a stressful situation, finding the next opportunity, continuing to prepare for a successful transition into, a full retirement at some point. Now is not the right moment for that. There's still some work to do. So one of the challenges here is going to be finding that next opportunity that's going to allow them to continue building their retirement assets. The question is, will they be able to find work that's going to pay at a similar level to allow them to continue to contribute towards retirement accounts? The balance sheet looks like this right now. So I've got about $350,000 in a TSP account, a little bit of home equity, and some money in savings. So that's kind of where they're at. And what I want to do is take a look at kind of these present value projections as well. So $350,000 in the TSP at 8% over the next 9 years. So they said they're 53, that gets them to age 62. So we're talking about $699,651. If things go well, we make 8% over the next 9 years. If they're able to add $15,000 a year in annual contributions, this is kind of similar to what they were doing, that puts us up to $901,950. Okay, so that's a pretty big jump. Looking at the income, just to kind of provide context here, so the $699, $651 in portfolio value, that gives us $27,986 at a 4% distribution rate. The $901,950 portfolio value at 4% gives us $36,078. Okay, so again, that's kind of that magic number there, right about $9,000. Actually, that's about $8,000 a year in increased income if they're able to continue to contribute to their TSP over that time period. And honestly, in like either one of these situations, it doesn't have to be contributing to your TSP. I'm just using that as a placeholder. You could contribute to a taxable account. You can contribute to an IRA account. Just getting money into long-term investments is really what we're talking about here. That will then be able to generate some retirement income. Then we can kind of sort out the tax implications, tax diversification, those sort of planning strategies that we love to talk about. But the whole concept here is just what's the impact of taking the retirement offer, and then, if I'm not able to contribute as much as I had in the past, how does that translate? How do I make a good decision here? What are the challenges that I'm facing to move forward with? I know this is really kind of an abbreviated look at both of these situations, but it gives you some context of what people are facing, what a lot of federal employees are facing with this decision point. And, I know a lot of folks are taking the offer right now just based on those factors that I described to you earlier in the video. And to me, it makes sense. It's just a matter of changing the plan, adjusting expectations in some cases, establishing more clear priorities so that we can get to the finish line, transition successfully into a full retirement. It allows us to live the life we want. So big decision points, really the best thing that you can do is kind of lay it all out on paper, work through it, and understand that the situation probably is not going to be perfect, but try to work through it. Okay, well, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on in the video here today. I hope you found this helpful. I would love to hear what you're working on, be a resource for you. So you have questions, you just have some planning items that you want a second look at, would love to hear about it and maybe be a resource for you if you can. Give us a like and subscribe, share with a friend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.